So, welcome back. We are really glad you're here with us again, diving into another topic. As always, we are calling you the learner because, well, that's what we're all here to do, right?
Yeah, exactly. To learn, to untangle things.
Right. And today, we're jumping into a deep dive on a really dense, highly charged piece of political commentary from a YouTube video by a channel called Ethioforum. Our mission today is to try and unpack this really complex geopolitical triangle involving Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Egypt.
It is a massive web to untangle, for sure.
It really is. But before we get into the details, I need to make a very clear, crucial disclaimer for you listening. This source material contains some very strong, heavily politically charged accusations.
Yeah, specifically from, an opposition viewpoint against the current Ethiopian leadership.
Exactly. So we need to be clear that in this deep dive, we are just impartially reporting on the claims. We're looking at the historical narratives and the perspectives the video presents. We are absolutely not endorsing or taking sides on any of these viewpoints. We're just, acting as an analytical mirror.
Right, we're just decoding the narrative they've built so you can understand the arguments being debated out there.
Totally. So let's get into the hook. Why does the president of Eritrea fly to Egypt, almost every 5 months? Especially when, and this is the crazy part, the two countries have virtually zero economic ties.
Yeah, it forces you to just completely throw out traditional metrics of international relations. I mean, usually we're used to alliances being built on something tangible, right? Like mutual benefit.
Right, like shared borders or massive infrastructure projects.
Exactly, or even heavy cultural exchange.
Right.
But the Ethioforum video isolates this relationship between Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki and Egypt to show an alliance that honestly actively defies all those conventional rules.
It really does, because the numbers they use in the source to illustrate this economic void are just jarring. I mean, an annual trade volume of less than $1 million.
Which is nothing for two sovereign nations.
It's nothing. To put it in perspective, the source points out that $1 million is roughly the price of just one, upscale residential house in Addis Ababa.
Wow.
Yeah, so that single property value basically encapsulates their entire yearly commercial exchange.
And you also have to look at what that negligible trade actually consists of.
Yeah.
Because Egypt is really only selling basic utilitarian stuff to Eritrea. We're talking fuel, plastics, pesticides.
Just the bare essentials.
Right. And in return, Eritrea exports absolutely nothing.
Wait, literally nothing?
Literally nothing. There's no reciprocal market there at all. I mean, they don't even share a land border to facilitate localized or informal trade.
So it's basically like a geopolitical dark matter relationship.
Yeah.
You can't see any economic trade holding it together, but you can see its gravitational pull tearing at the region.
That's a great way to put it.
But, if I'm playing devil's advocate here, there's that old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So how does a relationship survive entirely on a mutual rival without any, tangible mutual benefit?
Well, according to the source, that economic vacuum isn't a missing foundation. It is the defining feature of the relationship.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Because neither state is distracted by, managing tariffs or protecting joint corporate investments. The alliance is stripped down to just pure strategic military utility, and it's aimed entirely at their shared focal point, which is Ethiopia.
Wow. Okay, so to really understand that strategic utility, the video says we have to travel back 65 years to see how water, specifically the Nile River, has just driven all the regional politics.
Yeah, the source pulls the lens way back. They argue this is not just some modern political convenience. They trace a direct line back to Egyptian leaders Gamal Abdel Nasser and Anwar Sadat.
Right.
And the claim is that their foundational policy was to deliberately cultivate and arm Eritrean separatist groups, specifically Jabha and later Shabia.
Which is just a brutal masterclass in proxy containment, if you think about it.
Right.
By funding these separatist movements, Egypt wasn't just, offering ideological support. They were actively engineering a perpetual security crisis on Ethiopia's northern borders.
Exactly. The tactical goal was to keep Ethiopia entirely consumed by internal wars, just keep them permanently distracted and landlocked.
So that Addis Ababa could never consolidate enough wealth or stability to actually develop the Nile River.
That's the argument, yeah. And the source actually brings in historical documentation to back this up. They point to this admission published about 6 years ago in the newspaper Egypt Today.
Oh, right, where they openly acknowledged Egypt's role as a primary backer of Eritrean independence.
Yes, highlighting their substantial support during the 1990 to 1992 war with Ethiopia. And the structural commitment goes even deeper than that. Back in 1954, Egypt opened a dedicated radio station in Cairo specifically for Eritrean fighters.
Which is huge. I mean, giving a localized insurgency a broadcast transmitter in Cairo, that's a profound multiplier of power.
It really is.
It takes these isolated rebel factions and transforms them into this internationally recognized movement. That one radio signal basically forced the Ethiopian state to constantly divert money away from infrastructure and just pour it into military defense.
Right, so the mechanism of sabotage was fully operational decades before a single dam was ever drafted. Which brings the source's timeline up to that 2013 incident involving former Egyptian President Morsi.
Oh, man, the hot mic broadcast.
Yeah, the notorious hot mic. So Morsi convened this meeting with Egyptian politicians to just openly discuss strategies for sabotaging the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, the GERD.
And they were floating ideas about using neighboring territories like Eritrea as staging grounds for interference, right?
Exactly. And the kicker is they were completely unaware the meeting was being broadcast live on state television.
Which is just wild to think about. But the fallout from that broadcast really exposed the underlying fault lines perfectly. Because according to the video, after Morsi's plans were broadcast to the entire world, Isaias was the only regional leader to publicly support Egypt's stance.
Right. And standing alone on that stage signifies a really calculated geopolitical isolation. It shows a leader leaning entirely on Cairo.
But I have to ask, is this really just about the water? Or is it about broader regional hegemony and pride?
Well, the source argues that from the Egyptian perspective, water is the ultimate lever of power here. Water security is an existential absolute.
Right.
So an internally unstable Ethiopia is basically a geopolitical necessity for them because a fractured neighbor can't unify the capital needed to alter the historical flow of the Nile.
So if Ethiopia is unstable, Egypt's water supply remains completely unchallenged.
Exactly. And that concept of, engineered instability is the bridge the source uses to transition from historical proxy warfare to their most severe allegations.
Right. The stuff regarding 2018. Because this is where the narrative shifts from external containment to this theory of internal willing proxy capture.
Yeah, the flight logs really illustrate the pivot perfectly. So for years, Isaias was just a fixture in Cairo. But then starting in 2018, his travel patterns completely inverted.
He stopped flying to Cairo and just started making all these frequent trips to Addis Ababa instead.
Right. The New York Times actually documented 14 distinct meetings between Isaias and Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. And these were, both secret back-channel discussions and highly orchestrated public appearances.
And this is where the Ethioforum video utilizes this diplomatic pivot to level just a staggering accusation. They claim that Prime Minister Abiy effectively acted as a messenger or a proxy for the combined interest of Asmara and Cairo.
Yeah, essentially doing the work of dismantling Ethiopia from the inside.
Which, okay, as a listener, I have to push back on the sheer scale of that claim. Suggesting a sitting leader is operating as a proxy to dismantle their own state from the inside. That's an immense leap.
It's a massive claim.
It's like accusing a CEO of being hired specifically to bankrupt their own company for a rival firm. How does this political commentary even attempt to unpack or substantiate a narrative that extreme?
Well, the source builds that case by really weaponizing the optics of the diplomatic access that was granted during that period.
Okay, what kind of access?
They detail how Isaias spent nearly 2 years conducting these extensive, unhindered tours of Ethiopia's most sensitive military installations. He had access to Air Force bases, and crucially, he was invited to tour the GERD itself.
Wait, really? Touring the exact hydroelectric facility that his primary ally in Cairo had literally just been caught on a hot mic plotting to sabotage?
Exactly.
Wow. I mean, the cognitive dissonance of that imagery is exactly what the source is exploiting there.
Totally. They frame these base tours not as a sharing of security burdens between new allies, but as a hostile inspection. They portray the domestic leadership as facilitating the surveillance of their own sovereign defenses.
And beyond the military optics, the source also highlights a specific rhetorical attack, right? Something designed to target the psychological cohesion of the state.
Yeah, they emphasize this moment where Ethiopia's 3,000-year historical identity was dismissed as a mere fairy tale.
Right, using the Amharic word Tourette.
Exactly, Tourette.
Which is wild because stripping a nation of its founding mythos is a really calculated method of conceptual dismantling. I mean, in geopolitics, historical continuity and national pride are the glue holding diverse populations together.
Right.
So reducing 3 millennia of complex history to just a Tourette, a fairy tale, is a deliberate unmooring. And the video uses that specific linguistic detail to argue that the current leadership has decoupled itself from the core Ethiopian identity.
Making the state ideologically vulnerable to foreign maneuvering.
Exactly. But if this 2018 alignment between Isaias and Abay was providing Asmara and Cairo with all this unprecedented internal access, what broke it?
Right, something significant had to disrupt the circuitry. And the source points back to the origins of the GAD, but they reconstruct the narrative entirely to align with Egyptian strategic messaging.
Okay, so this brings us to the spiteful dam theory.
Yeah. They introduce this fascinating anecdote about the 1993 Organization of African Unity meeting in Cairo. According to the video, Isaias circulated a story claiming that during this summit, an Egyptian official deeply insulted the Ethiopian prime minister.
And Isaias alleges that the Ethiopian leader, acting purely out of anger, vowed to construct a massive dam strictly to punish Egypt.
Right. And pushing that specific origin story is a highly strategic maneuver, because by framing the GERD as a weapon of spite, born from a diplomatic slight, Isaias is actively stripping the project of its developmental legitimacy.
He's totally dismissing the reality that the dam was meant to generate 5,000 megawatts of electricity for development.
Exactly. If the dam is just a vindictive geopolitical tool, then Cairo is entirely justified in using any means necessary to dismantle it.
Right, and it contextualizes why Isaias was so deeply integrated with Egyptian policy. Before 2018, his travel itinerary shows him fully embedded in that defensive posture against the dam. He visited Cairo 12 times in just a few years, like roughly every 5 months.
But the real structural disruption, the event that violently recalibrated these alliances yet again, was the post-Pretoria pivot.
Okay, the Pretoria Agreement, which ended the Tigray War.
Right. And the source observes this moment not as a regional relief, but as the trigger for renewed geopolitical conspiracy.
It's like a pendulum. I mean, think about it. When Ethiopia is locked in this devastating internal conflict, the Isaias pendulum swings toward Addis Ababa. He stays close, oversees the military installations, operates right inside that environment of institutional stress.
Yeah, but the moment a negotiated settlement is reached, the moment peace or the Pretoria Agreement releases that internal pressure, the pendulum abruptly swings back to Cairo.
Because according to the Ethio Forum video, Isaias was intensely frustrated that the war didn't end in the total destruction of his adversaries in Tigray.
Exactly. He wanted permanent structural damage to Ethiopia's internal cohesion. And because the war ended in a diplomatic settlement instead of total collapse, that internal proxy utility essentially expired.
And the flight records validate this sudden change in strategy, right? Abandoning his presence in Addis Ababa, Isaias has flown to Cairo 4 times in just the past 18 months alone.
Yeah, and the source interprets these rapid-fire trips as tactical retreats to his primary ally, President El-Sisi. With the internal dismantling project stalled by the peace agreement, they have to draft a new architecture of sabotage from the outside.
It really highlights the tragedy in this cyclical geopolitics. The source literally portrays peace in Ethiopia as the very thing that triggers regional conspiracy.
It's a deeply cynical view of statecraft in the Horn of Africa.
So, to summarize this for you listening, what the Ethio Forum source does is paint a picture of a 65-year geopolitical chessboard, one where trade and traditional diplomacy mean absolutely nothing.
Right, it's a chess match sustained exclusively by the desire to control the Nile River, and doing so by maintaining punctual, engineered internal chaos in Ethiopia.
It really demands a complete reevaluation of how we read diplomatic headlines. You know, when two leaders meet on an airport tarmac, our instinct is to look for the trade agreements they're about to sign.
But this narrative forces you to look for the instability they might be actively coordinating.
Exactly. It is a really compelling, chilling framework for analyzing the frequent flyer miles of these regional power players.
It is, but for all the intricate, decades-long maneuvering detailed in this video, the entire strategic playbook is built on one massive, unspoken assumption.
What's that?
Well, this entire 65-year obsession with keeping Ethiopia landlocked, funding proxy insurgencies, drafting sabotage plans, it all relies on the premise that the Nile River will behave tomorrow exactly as it did a century ago.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the foundational currency of this entire geopolitical triangle is just a static, predictable flow of water.
Exactly.
So to leave you with a final thought to mull over, if you zoom out from all the secret meetings and the spite narratives, the accelerating reality of climate change threatens to just render this entire paradigm completely obsolete.
Right. Unpredictable rainfall, shifting flood patterns, prolonged droughts. Those things don't respond to proxy warfare.
They don't. And as the physical behavior of the river fundamentally alters, these nations might find that a strategic partnership built on zero trade and mutual containment offers absolutely no leverage against an atmosphere that is just rewriting the rules of survival for all of them. It makes you wonder how they'll have to throw out their old political playbooks.
It really does.
That is all we have for today's deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.